Hello and welcome to the KMint Webinar, Negotiate Your Worth. I'm Kathryn and I am a finance and pricing consultant. And I work with agencies, have been working with agencies, big and small, one-person agency right to 150 for over 30 years now around Australia and around the globe. I have clients in the US and the UK, Europe, helping them to improve the financial side of running their business. So I do this through my Show Me the Money mentor program, keynotes and workshops, also my CFO consultancy, KMint, and breakfast keynotes, workshops, half day, full day, how-to books and webinars. So today's webinar, I wanted to bring to you Negotiate Your Worth to show you how not to leave money on the table. We're going to try and break down some of those myths that surround the negotiation process. And we're going to leave you with a strategy to enhance your presentation performance. And I thought I might invite one of Australia's best negotiators to help me explore this very hot topic with you. So let me hand over and welcome Sam Trattles. Sam.
Thanks, Kathryn. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for hosting this webinar and thank you for everyone for joining. I am a negotiator and I do that because I love it, which I know not a lot of people do love it. So the business of Other Side of the Table is about shifting that thinking. So helping people to learn the craft of negotiating, which helps foster more positive conversations and healthier conversations throughout organizations, but also the link between your clients and your agency. So I've had the pleasure of working with some amazing agencies in my time, and that has been, when everything was humming, it was about us being us. It's about being a unit working together, because together we helped achieve the KPIs that were set out for the organization that I worked for, or have worked for over time. So these days we work with we work on the other side of the table, and really it's about building that capability within your teams to foster an open relationship with brands. So really about negotiating your worth with confidence.
Fantastic. Well, look, let's get into it. I'm going to start sharing my deck with you all, and we'll start down with an overview of what we're going to cover today. So today, I think we're going to start shifting your thinking around that, I guess, taboo topic of negotiation. And part of this is being really confident about your rate card. So I'm going to take that session and explore a little bit more, go deeper into your rate card, a discussion of the conversations around composition and how do you calculate it and how would you use that in the negotiation room. And comfortable with taboos, Sam's space where she talks to you about, what you do and don't talk about and feel comfortable about in the negotiation room. And then both of us are going to share on the presentation strategy, which is really going to, I guess, take you out of a traditional slide deck that you might be used to using to enhance it so that it really helps your negotiation process. So let's start with Sam. Let's shift the thinking of our audience.
Nice one. Thanks, Kathryn. So I want to start with a stat that came from the survey that we put out through the registration. Now, everyone was asked, how do you feel about negotiating on a scale of 1 to 10? And interestingly, more than 57% of you said that less than comfortable with it. So most people on the scale don't love negotiating. I am not surprised by that. But it might make you feel more comfortable to know that actually you're in good company. 87% of people are uncomfortable negotiating, no matter what's in the situation. Now, that's a global stat, but I think it rings true for Australians as well, based on what we're going to talk about here today in facing some of the taboos that we struggle with in Australia. So, lots of people ask me, well, how are you going to get me to love negotiating, Sam? Because I'm totally on the other end of the scale and I hate it. So I'm going to start really simply. If you hate negotiating or your teams tell you that they hate negotiating, have a conversation around it. And that's actually what I'm going to suggest to you is don't call it a negotiation. Reframe the situation into a series of conversations, because that's actually just what it is. We don't go in there to have a negotiation. We're going in there to have a conversation and possibly have a number of those conversations. So with that simple tactic, it actually reduces the anxiety and stress around that conversation and the pressure that you're putting on yourself as well as your team. Now, we didn't learn this skill in school, so cut yourself some slack. We need to build some new memories so that you and your team feel more comfortable to negotiate the worth that you offer to brands. So the second point I wanted to make on shifting your thinking is that everybody should be negotiating in your agency. What? You said? That's crazy. The buck stops with me. Well, it actually doesn't stop with you. It should be about everybody being comfortable with talking about money. They should start to be comfortable about talking about margins, and also having direct conversations with clients. If you can help your team to talk about the value that your brand delivers, your agency delivers to their brand, then it's going to start opening more conversations. And it's not just a narrow focus around money. We want to be clear that this is about the value conversation rather than about money. And then the final point about shifting your thinking is about not leaving it till the end of the discussion. So build it into your process. This can be achieved by creating a team of people who are straight talkers, people who are comfortable asking uncomfortable questions. And I mean that with an air of curiosity, rather than just asking endless amounts of questions. Be clear about what questions you need answers to. I think changing your approach to responding to briefs is really important, about how you can get clarity throughout the process rather than, again, waiting till the end of that. And then take a long view of your partnership. Now, and I say that based on the relationships I had with my agencies I mentioned earlier. Once it was about us achieving the goal, it became less about us versus them, or them versus us. And you know that feeling when you've been working with a client who's particularly difficult, which I used to be able to be, because I had big pressure and big numbers, big KPIs to achieve. Once it stopped being about that frustration and about, okay, how are we going to solve this problem together? Once you become an us and together, it just changes the whole game. So it's a really, really good way to shift your thinking.
I'm just going to elaborate on that because I think something that Sam said was quite important there. She used to be on the other side of the table doing the negotiation. So put yourself where you are on this side of the table in the agency arena, and then you have Sam on the other side, and she's got all these KPIs and goals and expectations that she has to meet. So I think if you can see that and think about the other person rather than your slide deck, really get into their world. And that's what our presentation is all about today, getting into your world to understand how you can shift what you're currently doing to take it up a level or two. And we're going to just move forward now into rate card confidence. So Sam, I might just pass back to you to tell us a little bit from your angle, what does rate card confidence mean?
Yeah, thank you. So I think there's 3 ingredients to being able to use a rate card to negotiate. And those are flexibility, tolerances, and empowerment. So building flexibility into your rate card is really important, because if your team don't know where they can flex, how can they negotiate that? So being clear that you build it with flexibility in it, which Kathryn will talk to shortly, is really fundamental to the success. If you walk into a JB Hi-Fi, those people can negotiate with you because they know where there's flexibility. So it's about building that, baking that into the way that you do business, because it makes everybody negotiate for you. The next one is around tolerances. So being clear about what triggers a relaxing of your rate card. So that could be if you work with not-for-profit organizations, it could be particular clients, projects, or circumstances that will then release a different percentage on the tolerance. Now, to have that work, you need to be clear on what's the profit margin. And so if we were to work with a not-for-profit and it was an extra, say, 10, 15% off your main rate card, then are we still making a profit on that? So is the tolerance enough for us to make a healthy margin on that deal? So it's really important to know your tolerances as well. And the final ingredient is about having an empowered team. I can't go on about this enough, is that as a agency lead or your leadership team, it traditionally has always fallen on those people to actually negotiate the deal. But if you are working with a team that some people in the team aren't so confident, so buddy them up with the negotiators or the people in your team who are confident to negotiate. Let them shadow the good negotiators and see how they do it. Have a game plan that they work on together before they go in, and then see it play out. Because when you come back and debrief, it's like, oh, wow, that was really clever how you did that. And I understand the process of negotiating negotiating, and how did we use our rate card to lead that, or what were the circumstances for that? So, you know, that's one of the things where pushing things down to an empowered team is really important to take the pressure off the leaders. And also you may look at something where, can you hand the reins over to someone more junior to lead the negotiation? Now, I'm not suggesting that you leave them out to dry, but think about what is the worst thing that could happen in that situation. And more than likely, the worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to have to step in and help them, which you would do anyway, but let them take the lead rather than you always taking the lead. So obviously there's many ways to build a rate card, and I'm going to hand over to Kathryn for you to take over from here.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Sam. I really like that JB Hi-Fi bit at the beginning as well. I get that when I go to the Good Guys and I'm trying to buy something, and the sales rep comes over to me and is more than happy to offer me a discount. Like I love it, because it doesn't happen in many stores where you see the price ticket on the item and then the sales assistant comes in and says, I can do a better price. So not that I'm advocating we'd say that in our presentation, but your people sitting around that table are able to have the conversation if they understand the flexibility, their tolerance that they're allowed to move within, and that they're empowered to do that. The empowerment word that we've been talking about here is confidence in the clarity of it all. So I'm going to move through now just into rates. There are three aspects I want to talk you through. So one of them is, what is the composition of a rate? So if I say the hourly rate is $150 or $100 or $300, how is that made up? How do you allocate the cost base across the rates across your teams? And then your profit margin. What is the profit margin? How do you calculate? So I'm going to use some trusty slides from my Excel sheet to show you how. And it's something that I build up with all of my clients so that it automates. Every time you make a change to your budget, your rate card is automatically updated with these three aspects in mind. Now, from the registration survey, 50% of you responded saying, no, we don't really know what the profit margin is per person. Some of you said that you have a profit margin for the agency, and some of you said that for a division you might, so for a type of service, you might know that margin. So when you're putting your slide deck together, do you talk about the agency profit margin? Unlikely. Maybe by divisional service, possibly, but it's more likely to do with hourly rates if you're getting to that discussion point. So let me walk you through it. Firstly, the composition. We've got our people. We're an agency. Predominantly our largest cost are our people with our smart intel. We've got our overheads, our running costs to run the business. So the office space, the hot desks, wherever you might be, the tea and the coffee, the lights, the stationery, you name it, all the IT. Provisions, really important. You absolutely must factor in provisions. These are the sorts of things like ATO debt, if you had any from past last year, any additional costs that you might have coming up to do with a result of COVID. Maybe there are additional costs that you had to factor in. What about new headcount, or maybe you need new computers? All of that are the provisions that you would need to add in. Most businesses will just copy over last year's budget and they'll have the people and the overheads, but they don't think what else. There might be things on your balance sheet, for example, like car leases and whatnot, or loans. And of course, profit. I really advocate putting in the profit as the part of the rate, and that's exactly how you'll get it. So if there was, let's say in this example, $50 for the hourly rate for the person, 50 for the running cost and the provisions, and 50 for profit, that would be an $150 an hour rate. So you must make sure you've got your profit for the whole agency factored into this calculation and then allocated across people. So let's see how we can do that. Now, don't be scared. It's going to be Excel. Are you ready? So on my little Excel sheet here, I've just used some fake names, Millie, Molly, Mandy, Peter and John, and Paul, and I've given you the FTE, full-time wages, including super, and they're all nicely rounded. Then I've got your overheads and provisions. I've just added those in as a lump, and profit, which is then divided across all of the people based on those little percentages that you can see. So this column here is just what is Millie's salary wage component as a percentage of the overall. And that's how I've allocated my totals. You'll see the profit, the 400, it's just a target I've set for my agency. And I'm just allocating that based on the weighting of the salaries. The thinking is that the more senior you are, the cleverer you are, the more expertise you offer, and therefore it would make sense that you are going to be more expensive. So that's how I've allocated. You'll notice down here, I've also got the 2.9 multiple. So this is a conversation you'll often have in procurement meetings where they'll ask you or they'll tell you. So again, it's something you could automatically calculate. The most important things to note here are the full-time equivalent. So just because you've got someone working 2 days a week or 3 or a day, you pay them on a day rate, you really need to annualize that up to be able to compare apples and apples. It's really important. It makes a big difference. Likewise, the available working hours. Are you a 7.5 or an 8-hour day putting to your employment contracts? Please get this right. It makes a massive difference, like hundreds of thousands of dollars a year if you get this wrong. Then we're going to need something out of your job management programs as well. So you need your target and what is the actual productivity or utilization that you might use. The average is about 60%, but that will take in those that are 90% billable, the worker bees, and it will take those that are probably lower, more like your MDs, CEOs, who are not fully billable. So there is a big difference here as well. So having a look at what's relevant for your organization and putting in the right metrics. So it looks like this, where we've now sort of extended across where we've got their total cost. We've added the hours for the year and they're all full-time equivalents 1. So everybody's got 1840 hours at this point. However, I think Millie should be 80% billable, but when I look at her timesheet reports, she's actually only showing 50% billable. This is really important as well, because if I calculate my hourly rates based on my dream, and that's not what's happening, you can put as many hours on a job as you like, but you're never going to recover all of your costs because the rates are too low. It's really important to have a look at what the reality is and then use that to compute your hourly rates. Let's take a look at the next step, building out to the right. So we've got our targets. If I was to use the target for Millie and say she needs to generate this amount, 322,000, she's 80% billable, and only of the 1840 hours, she's left with 1472 hours that she can bill. So then this is just a simple sum. It's the 322 divided by the available hours she has. Really important again, because if I was to calculate it on the 80, I'm going to get different rates. Apologies, this is actually calculated on my target. So her target productivity of 80% would show me that it's 219 as a pure cost rate, including that profit target. I might then move it up to say 220 an hour at that stage. And you can see the same as we go down for the others. And I've just worked out what a blended rate would be, just doing an average at the bottom. What if I now use the 50%? So for every day that Millie works, half of it is not used as billable time. So she actually, her rate needs to be almost like double to cover that downtime. What does that look like? So instead of 219, it's jumped to 351 because she's got less hours available really to bill. So the 322 divided by 920 is going to give us a higher figure. So working this through in your program, you might not want to put in these kind of odd numbers. I would say you might be sort of rounding them up to put in a cost rate and then the sell rate in your system. So your job management program, whether that's Harvest or Workflow Max or Job Bag, Pegasus, Workbook, you name it. So you might put in the cost rate and then you have a sell rate, and instantly you can calculate what the profit margin is as a pretty basic calculation. However, I like to go a little deeper than that. So I want to split it out. So if the cost rate is 219, show me that in a split down to get me the 219. So for Millie, she has $75 an hour contributed to wages, $80 an hour is contributing to our overheads and our provisions. This 155's break even. So I can't tolerate anything less than 155 on a negotiation with a client or prospect. I've got $64 I can play with here to get to that 219. So these are the sorts of, this column here is your negotiation flexibility tolerance level. I remember I said at the beginning I was going to allocate it based on the size of the salary, indicating the expertise of the person. That's what I've done here. I've kind of worked it out that the more senior you are, it makes more sense that you're going to be more expensive. Some businesses like to just average it equally across, so allocate evenly your profits and overheads. So that's all I've done here. It makes Millie's rate of 219 look better at 176 because it allocated more towards the juniors. But it might make this one, the 110, look too expensive at 149, say. So worth having a play around with that and see what your agency breakdown looks like. And if you can have it automatically linked to budget, all the better. Now, let's move on to the subject of taboos. I'm going to pass back to Sam to take on this one.
I'm just taking a moment, Kathryn, because that was quite incredible. Thank you. I definitely think you need to come and do that in my business.
I'd love to. It's one of my favourite things is splicing it down.
It's really interesting. It's such great. I mean, it's so detailed, and it's. I'm not that sort of person. I don't think like that. So having you come and do that, like, that's just incredible to know how clear and easy it is for my team and myself even to negotiate with those tolerances. So yeah, I've learned something. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
And even if you're just a one-man band or you're 150 people, it works the same way, and you only need to do it once. And then it automates every time you do a change to your running costs and your people base. So yeah, good point.
Cool. Okay, so getting comfortable with taboos. This is a really hard ask. I really know that, and I appreciate that so much. But we live in a society, as I mentioned earlier, that has lots of taboos, and I've literally only written down 3. And you know, these are the ones that are really critical. So it's really hard to make a shift away from that, away from hating these things. And it's really easy to just keep avoiding them, but you're really missing out if you don't lean into them and create a culture that means we lean into these things. I didn't know. I'm a very direct person, and it took me, I don't know, maybe I'm a little slow sometimes, but it took me a really long time to realize that being direct is a taboo. But being direct with purpose should never be. You should be able to ask questions and probe so that you're really clear on what people do and don't like, because ultimately this is costing you money if you're putting this to the side. And I'm going to talk about why that is in a minute. So, you know, I encourage you to encourage your teams about having uncomfortable conversations. You can use that language if it helps. You know, we've got to face this. We have to have some uncomfortable conversations. And so how come and how do we do that? So being open to talk about the value. So I mentioned earlier about your team getting comfortable and clear. If they can't articulate the value, perhaps, you know, when you're leaving, 24 hours before you're going to give a presentation, perhaps it's about the most junior person in the team to explain, well, what's the value we're delivering by this pitch? And if they can explain it, well, you've done an awesome job, because that's really easy. If they can't, maybe there's a little bit more work to be done. And lucky you've left yourself a buffer, because you've got 24 hours till you have to go. So I always do sleep on it before you go, rather than run at the door. You know, that also creates curiosity and direct approach in your more junior staff, but also from top down. We all, as the more senior people, we always feel like we have to have our together all the time. And actually, no, we don't. We don't have to have all the answers, and we don't have to have, you know, everything slick and perfect all the time. We just need to be able to say, you know what, I don't actually know the answer to that question, and I'll come back to you on that. But, you know, this is fostering a curious culture, and more important to that is actually helping everyone in the agency to find their voice. We're at a time in history where there's 5 generations in the workplace. Never has that ever happened again. And we need to find ways that everyone can contribute and find their voice. You know, we're looking at diversity of thinking, and you could never get more of it in an agency environment. There's probably, most agencies would have those multitude of those generations in the workplace. So we need to take advantage of that, because we want to be asking people different questions from different points of view, whether that's my job or my age or my interests or my sexuality. I have different questions based on who I am. So let's not let people come to meetings and not say anything. I used to always find it strange when there'd be a mute in the meeting, and it'd be like, why is that person coming if they're not going to say anything? And so, you know, I'm not trying to be rude. I just don't understand why there's a cost to someone coming. So if they're coming, they need to bring value. They need to deliver that and make themselves also build their confidence, which is what we really want to do. So we want to be able to, I want to expand onto the next page, because I want to be give it some context with some realities that exist. I've got 3 realities here that helps you to lean into uncomfortable taboos, so to embrace them, as it were. So clients will always think that what you propose costs too much. That is a reality. It's human nature. So we need to actually stop talking about the money factor. We need to have conversations so that it's clear about the value that this unlocks. You know, what is the purpose of the brief? What are we trying to achieve as a team? And then making sure that okay, well, this is what we can achieve for this budget. Maybe if we stretch the budget a little bit, we could achieve a little bit more, but keep it focused on what it unlocks, rather than saying, oh yes, you know, your rate card's pretty high and that system's out of range for us. It just seems crazy to me that things would be decided based on what the cost is, what the last page is. We always see clients turn to the last page. I never liked doing that, because I wanted to hear the idea for all it was worth. Now, whether I could afford it or not was my decision, because I needed to go and fight for more budget if I liked it. But if you're giving, you know, if when the client turns to the back page and you're like, don't be like that. Just be like, oh, I knew they were going to do that. Be in the position where it's like, I know what I'm going to say next, because in your preparation for that part of the negotiation, you're going to have a response to that. It's like, oh yes, Sam, I appreciate that you're budget conscious, but I want to talk to you about what the options might be. And Kathryn's going to talk about that in a minute. So the next reality is that clients love talking about their business and their project goals. We just love it. We want you to know what we're faced with. What are the challenges that we've brought you on to help us solve and to help make us look good, let's be honest. So, you know, instead of asking random questions, ask your team to ask direct and to ask curious questions. So we want to learn about the specifics and as much about that as possible. So the brief doesn't always give you all the answers. And we know, you know, some people can't even put a brief together, so you're having to write a reverse brief. But, you know, if the budget's not clear, ask very direct questions about the budget. Is there any fat? Is there any other department that will be contributing to this? Is travel from a different budget? You know, those little nitty gritty bits that actually unlock a little bit of your budget every time you ask a question like that. And then ask about their expectations. And I think this is a really important question to ask, is about what level of senior staff do you expect on this project? Again, you might be thinking that you need to put your most senior people on it, but actually they're like, no, we're cool with the entry level. So really start probing for more clarity on their projects, so that they start talking, and you know, 2 ears, 1 mouth, as they say. So you want to learn from them. Interestingly, from the survey, 47% of you said that your team are not comfortable asking these questions directly in the room. So we need to find ways to unlock that for them to feel more comfortable and empowered to do so. So one final reality before we move on is that it is a cultural thing as well. But when people don't like something, typically when Australians don't like something, we're often too polite to tell the truth. So, you know, there's often times where you'll present the deck and it's like, oh, there's silence at the end of that. So, you know, by them saying, okay, we'll come back to you, rather than talk about it in the room, that's costing you money, because you're walking away with, oh, I think they liked it, and I'm not sure that they liked it. What do you think? So rather than accept that, keep them talking. So bank into that you've got an hour for your presentation or 90 minutes for your presentation. Don't finish it at 50 minutes into the hour. Finish it earlier so that you can actually build that into that conversation. And so instead of having to go back and forth on a pitch deck, you can save money by not faffing around like that. It makes the whole process more profitable for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess my perspective of taboos is a little bit like Sam alluded to at the beginning. Don't talk about the hourly rates. Don't let yourself go there. Have some other questions or other territory that you're willing to discuss. And remembering also that is a partnership with the person on the other side of the table and what's in it for them. So I would always like to be confident with the money conversation about the value rather than the hourly rate, which is going to just commoditize you and allow them to compare you to other slide decks that probably have a rate card attached to the back. So move from that to value pricing, change the conversation to how are you going to impact your client's position with the proposition you put on the table there? What's in it for them? So let me introduce you to the value pricing wheel. So some of you may have seen this KMint device already, where we move from varying degrees of risk around the wheel, from the hourly rate, which can be a conflict of interest, where you want to charge as many hours as possible to deliver, but the client may be comparing to others that they're negotiating with to get those hourly rates down. So moving through some efficiencies, perhaps you could start talking to them about bundles and packaging, product templates that you offer, which are more efficient for them. Through to positioning, which is where we're going to look at, so the 6 o'clock spoke is a very popular one, more so post-COVID, where hourly rates are not as popular, it seems, and there are definitely clients that are looking for that ROI and getting smarter about the value proposition. Something like a 10% increase, and maybe you share in that increase. Definitely through innovative intellectual property, and right round the wheel to maybe some clients you're prepared to take equity in. So that would be perhaps in the circuit of, the startups. It's a really good way to look at it. Today, what I'm going to do is explore the very important choice of the client. You really don't want to go to a lolly shop and just find that there's just one lolly there for you to have. So it's a little bit like your proposition deck, your proposal to client. Sure, they've given you a brief and you're responding, but I'd like you to give them a choice. And this is my reason. Let's say you have good, better, and a best solution. Your client's now looking at all of those. Now, I don't know about you, but I definitely want the one on the right. I want that all day sucker. I mean, the little pink one on the red one on the left is fine, but I actually want the best. And this is a bit of psychology as well. So knowing your audience comes in handy. So let's move on. If you were to offer the response to brief, let's say it's web subscriptions, $59, then really your client or prospect has a yes, I'll buy it, or no, I won't buy it. It's a binary decision. Where do you go from there? It's really hard. You're going to have silence, crickets in the air, because, what if they say no? What do you say next? So I'd like you to consider offering two options. So you have the one on the left, which is the web subscriptions. That's the response to brief. And then you offer them this one, which also gives them print. So the price tag is different. And it's what your agency has decided to offer, something that's extended on the brief or you think would improve their position. What if we added a third element? So now we've got the two and there's one in the middle. So instead of that binary yes or no choice, they've got three options. And previously I wanted the all-day sucker on the right, but now maybe depending on my price psychologically, I might go, I never buy the cheapest because that's just not me. I don't want to buy the most expensive, so I'm going to go for the one in the middle. So it's kind of like a decoy effect almost. The one in the middle is actually the one you want your client to choose, but whichever one they choose, because you've understood your rates, you will be fine profit-wise. But you're giving them a choice and allowing them to choose the one that suits them best. And now, instead of talking about the hourly rate, you're talking about the options that you've laid out in front of them. And you're going to talk about the value pricing of all of the options that you've laid out and why you think that's important for them. Get creative with this pricing. I mean, don't just do the hourly rates. Show your client that you're open to negotiation and be flexible and discuss it with them. Very importantly, it's a partnership. So, you don't want to feel uncomfortable here. You're working together. It's all about being together and it's about their return on investment. They're going to pick your agency as opposed to another agency if they can see you understand them and that you're going to start talking to them about the two main metrics, which is creative effectiveness and the financial value. So if you can start talking about this and about the impact you're going to make on those two key metrics for them, you've come a long way. And when they try and compare you to another presentation from an alternative agency, you're just going to come up head and shoulders above because you're working with your client or your prospect to create that partnership. So let's move to our presentation strategy, because I think at the top end of this webinar, I spoke to you about enhancing your current presentation strategy. So right now, whatever it is, your cookie cutting standard slide deck that you might slip out a few slides, add a few new in, I'm hoping that through our conversation with you now, that you'll be able to say, okay, we're going to revisit that. I'm not saying throw it away. It's pretty good as is, I'm pretty sure. But you're going to enhance it with some of the attributes that Sam is about to share now, and then I'll follow with some key slides that I'd like to see you include.
Beautiful. Thanks, Kathryn. I mean, the wheel is interesting to me because that's something that I didn't know until I came onto the other side. And so it's so interesting how you have to be creative. And I wish I had that to actually guide me in the early days, but I bumped into some walls instead. But it's really interesting because I have so many different makeups of deals these days that keeps the business interesting. And I guess because we're agile and there's not many of us in my team, we can make some of those decisions, and it's about the risk as well versus the reward. So that equity stuff is really interesting when working with startups, because at the beginning I was very challenged with actually working with startups because, you know, they have no money, so they had no cash money. So yeah, it's an interesting piece to actually think through about, oh, how do I use that in my negotiations? So yeah, it comes up a lot, which is beautiful. Thanks for sharing. So presentation strategy, what is she talking about? Why has that got to do with how I negotiate? So it's got heaps to do with it. It's got so much to do with it. So I want to take you, so actually 69% of the people surveyed said that they're leaving more than $80,000 on the table, possibly hundreds of thousands of dollars on the table, which is why we're having this conversation. So, you know, if we know we're leaving money on the table, the challenge is, how do I pick it back up? And I think it's about how you present. So, you know, just bear in mind for a moment that your typical presentation strategy might sound something like this. So your team presents a beautiful, well thought out slide deck, a big slide deck, possibly 56-page slide deck. You've presented this to your primary audience, which is typically somebody in marketing, because we love that stuff. We love all the pictures. We love all of the detail that goes into a big slide deck. Then you email that over and await for feedback. However, how often does your process include the following? One, your team arrive at the client's office with hot paper, meaning they've picked the papers off the presentation, off the printer as they rushed out the door. So they haven't had a moment to think about how this might play out or how we can build flex into the negotiation, into the pitch. Two, you present your large-scale pitch deck to your main contact and they don't give you much in the room, which we talked about before. Then you email the document over and you get crickets for a little while. And then you have to follow them up and they say to you, well, we need to go and get internal approvals from different departments now. So you leave them with that deck for them to have to cut down. Or then you get called in and you have to deliver the same presentation to different stakeholders. And each time in between, you have to tweak that deck and update it and add something and move something around and enhance it in different ways. Look, I've got no doubt that that is very frustrating, and I've done it and I know it's a mistake. And it's wasting you lots of time, and it's contributing to you leaving money on the table. So what I wanted to look at is a different way of doing that. So instead of just sending through that 56-page slide deck, what if you sent through a one-page summary of the idea as well? Now, why is this important? So put on one A3 piece of paper the entire idea. I know it will be hard, but if you can't explain it in an elevator, then maybe it's too complicated an idea in the first place. So put out a big piece of paper, split it into different sections, and have a think about it from the lens of all the different stakeholders that need to sign off on this. Those stakeholders might like the numbers, they might like the creative elements, or they might like the expected outcomes. You know, the sales guys might need to know about what is expected on that side of things. The retail team might need to know what's going to happen, what are they required to do in store, etc., etc. Those stakeholders are the likes of CFOs, CEOs, and the procurement team, and any other teams that project will impact. So you need to think for them, because that makes the getting to yes much easier. So if you don't do this, what you have to do is you've got to rely on your primary contact taking the 56-page slide deck and cutting it down in a way that tells the story that you envisaged and sharing that around the organization to get sign off. And you have to hope that they do that in a way that you actually go, oh, they're selling it in the way that I think. Or you just do it for them. So this is what you would spend your your 24 hours before you go into the room building, so that it's like, oh, if we had 1 minute, if with on Zoom, technology, we can't rely on it too much at the moment, as I'm hotspotting off my phone as I say that. But if everything broke and I only had 3 minutes to present the idea, how would I do that? And you just pull out the one A3 piece of paper and you present it that way. It will give you enough time to tell me what the idea is, and I'll just be like, wow, I love it, or we're off base and we need to reshape it. But it's a really strong tool. It means that you get to yes faster, but it also means you get to no just as fast, which is really, really important, because a long drawn out maybe is useless. So if we can be very specific about what we want from these people and what people do and don't like, then that's going to make the pitch process more revenue focused as well. Now, just one more thing that I wanted to point out on before we go off presentation strategy. We've all been there when we get the green light on a project, but then we hear those words that nobody wants to hear. Oh, hang on, Sam, we just need to get procurement involved to craft the agreement, which means that the game enters a new phase, and often unexpected round. So I call this the procurement factor. And poor old procurement, it's not their fault. They really do a great job, but it is when it's unexpected and it's frustrating because it comes at the end. We're now doing another layer of negotiating on our rates. So I wanted to give you 2 simple ideas to ponder to break this cycle. So it's really important to learn about your client's approval processes early. Ask them about who are the decision makers, what departments do they represent, and listen out for the word procurement. If you hear that word, then start engaging with them very, very early. If possible, invite them to the presentation stage. And it sounds strange to invite them into a creative presentation and they're going to sit through 56 slides, but you're going to see their reaction, you're going to build that relationship with them, and you're going to hear their concerns in that session rather than to hear their opinions at the end. And particularly you want to hear what their answer to that question about the level of seniority of people on the team, because that's the things that procurement people look out for as well. So, doing this means that when you ultimately have to work with that person to craft the agreement, then you have a relationship with them, and it should really quite smoothly move forward into the next phase to getting onto the project.
Yeah, look, I would support that. The agency mix that I work with across Australia and overseas, I'd say 50% of those agencies do need to deal with procurement. And the smart ones and the ones that are having a conversation, that are seeing this as a partnership, are not frightened to ask right from the get-go questions of procurement. Now, I'm conscious that some tenders and RFQs don't allow that, but they all do ask if you have any immediate questions or concerns to write them through. And I'd write them anyway. We're human beings. We want to create a relationship. So if you can, you'll see that some of those clients or prospects will reply to you, and definitely try and get these other stakeholders to attend the session. It gives you a pretty good clue as to whether or not this is the right match or partnership for you, if the prospect or client is willing to engage right from the start. So with the presentation strategy, I'm going to move a little bit deeper into the deck, the 56 slide pages or page deck, hopefully not hot off the press. Let's get into the world of your marketeer counterpart. So remember what I said before about, what's in it for them. Think about them. What does that person need to have them look great, to know they've delivered, they've got the right agency, they can prove ROI, value and impact. What do they actually need? It would be great, as Sam said, for the deck that you're providing to have a slide dedicated to the marketing counterpart, whoever it is, of the types of metrics. Remember, we're talking about the impact you make for them. Something like this, and not Excel spreadsheets. So here's an example that I've just pulled together. It might have a graph that you've made up on the information available, where it tracks through what the trends might look like for their brand, their product. It might have a marketing pie. Maybe you're just one wedge here, and you can start to lay some your details in. Maybe there's a marketing funnel and you're part of this funnel, or you're creating the funnel for your counterpart. Definitely awards. If there's some sort of industry award, or if it's on our side of the fence, on our side of the table, an award relevant to your client, then I think it's important that perhaps you show that so they know they've got the right partner on board, that we understand their world, their awards, they understand that we've got the creds. The net promoter score, of course, is another really easy one that can be visually quite attractive, and show it what you expect to happen, like into the future. You can predict today in your slide deck what you think that enhanced position would be. It's a really neat way that they can just pull out that slide, make it their own. You could use it as your KPIs, and this is what we would like to see happen. And now in our next meeting, when you appoint us, we're going to put down the real details, and then at the end of the campaign, we'll measure them together. What about this guy? So I'm going to try the poll here. Does anyone, here's my polls. If I click, does anyone actually already put metrics in for the finance team in their slide deck? So you get a choice. You get to say yes, always, or yes, sometimes, or just no. So if I launch the polling, let's see if I can get it to work. You've got a couple of minutes now to click which one you think. And I'll give you oh, look, you've all done it. It's working. It's the first time I've done a poll, so appreciate that. All right, and then I have to end the poll. So I'm just looking at the numbers to see if everyone's had a chance. Yes, you do include a CFO deck or a metrics deck sometimes, and no. All right, I'm going to end the poll because nobody has said yes always. So half of you say sometimes and the other half of you say no, which is what I expected, because it's not what we're talking to the prospect or client about. We're talking about what this agency here right now can do for them. What I'm asking you to do is get into their world, get on the other side of the table, think about what they're going to do with that deck. Well, they're going to take it back to their office and they're going to show the CFO possibly, definitely going to show the procurement, and they're going to show their team, and they're going to make some assessment against other agencies in this potentially pitch environment. So you want to give a slide for the CFO. It might look a little bit like this. Let's move down on my slide deck. I don't like the blue background, so I apologize for that. I probably could have got a bit more creative, but this is what success looks like to a creative CFO. Using the brand, so up revenue, global revenues up 70% in 6 years. Profit, 1 million in 5 months. Increase, 80 million over 2.5 years. Market share from 1 to 4% in a 2-year period. So this sort of data you're going to get because you're confident as an agency that you've achieved this sort of metric for previous clients in a previous year or whatnot. You might even have data that you've seen on the client that you're presenting to, and you think you can do better than that. So you need to kind of extrapolate what you think you could do and what are the important measures for the CFO. The Chief Financial Officer wants revenue, profit, return on investment, shareholder value, all that sort of thing. So try and work up a slide that is going to talk to that person. What about this guy? So what does the CEO need to know? Well, he's probably thinking, or she's thinking about business growth, market share, brand equity, again, stuff that you probably have absolutely no clue about unless you spend a little bit of time, maybe meeting with Sam before you launch over your presentation. And this is what the slide for the CEO might look like. Here I'm using one of the world's best campaigns for Snickers, a combination, collaboration, partnership between BBDO and Snickers. You're not you when you're hungry. Now the brief was an 85,000 job, and they generated over 850,000. That's 10 times the original investment. So the ROI on this campaign was huge. You'll also notice down here they won 47 Cannes Lion Awards. This is a record achievement. If any of you attending understand what the Cannes Lion is all about, this is no easy feat. So as a CEO, I would be very excited to have a slide like this that I can use as my, wow, we've just appointed this agency that, is going to see our global sales increase 16%. We're going to see our market share grow. We're going to move from number 7 to number 1. You're talking to the CEO about what you're about to do for their brand or their campaign, this campaign. So again, just as an example, but this slide can be something that he or she is going to brag about at drinks on Friday night internally or beyond. Let's move on to procurement. Now, what procurement's all about and the reason they came to existence, they're usually legal or finance, or possibly project managers, and they're all about efficiencies and improvements and quality. So they're interested in maybe definitely in pricing as well, because if they can improve that, they like the word discount. They're also interested in rates, multiples, and benchmarking. You know this, you've heard it before when you've pitched and when you've tendered and when you've put presentations across. So let's build them a slide. Now, for today, I'm just giving you an example table that kind of talks about the increased position of a client's revenue, profit, markets, etc., or maybe the reduction of certain things, risk, waste, conflict. And perhaps you're going to improve the position of the client or create something completely new, a new product or a service. So this is a talking point slide. You might know your client quite well, so you'll be able to put some detail into this slide. If not, then show the prospect or client that you're interested in talking to procurement about increasing their position or reducing certain things, improving and creating. Again, it's going to be a different slide and a different approach to most agencies, and quite refreshing. So use it as a conversational starting point. I guess from my experience as well, and picking up on what Sam said earlier, if you do have procurement in the room, and I'm not sure that the CEO would be in the room, but then again, maybe, or the CFO, you've now got a slide that you're presenting and talking directly to them. And it's right then that you have the opportunity to discuss what's in it for them or what are their expectations, and, you know, kind of depart away from what we can do for you, because of course you can do the job. Let's see what they want and start collecting that information. As Sam said, 2 ears, 1 mouth. Listen out for the stuff that's of interest to them. Tick it on this little matrix or add something to the matrix. And then you can continue that conversation with them at a later date. The most important thing is to keep the lines of communication open, and whether that be in this meeting or beyond. So keep a few cards hidden and always be open for that negotiation and conversation continuation. All right, so let's just move to our final slides, and then we're going to click over to some Q&A. The takeouts for today, negotiation. So Sam, back to you on the mindset. Give us a little wrap on that point.
Just to recalibrate, you know, it's not a complicated thing, but it's something you need to invest in. It's shifting the mindset of your team as a whole. You know, thinking about how do we negotiate up and down the whole process so that it's just part of what we do, and also embedding that, knowing your client's approval process throughout the thing, because we can sometimes skip over that. So we just need to take a step back and go, oh, how would we rate ourselves? You know, maybe it's a conversation at your next team meeting. How do we rate ourselves to feel confident to ask questions throughout the process, so that it's not just on the shoulders of the leaders?
And I guess, you know, we move on to that approval process. So that would be something you would say in the presentation as well. You might be looking at a slide that actually works through the approval process that you're aware of, because on an RFP you probably would be, and you can just confirm that detail. Moving through, we talked about rates as well. So really important to know your numbers. That's just every agency should know anyway, but it's something that doesn't always filter down to the team. So you might like to explore that with the team to show them how it is composed, and then make sure, double check your own numbers to make sure you've got your FTEs, your productivity levels all correct. And as we come up to new financial year, make sure that you've updated for the year ahead any provisions that you need to include, your profit target, and be real about it. What do you need? And then have those ready to go into your job management solutions, your drop-down menus for 1st of July. But also to look at that, the money wheel, which kind of, we step that into the taboos conversation. Stop talking about stuff that everyone feels uncomfortable about, because it's a downward spiral about the hourly rate. Maybe move into that value and choice model. Did you have anything else that you wanted to highlight on taboos, Sam?
Yeah, just embrace them. Just go for it and harness uncomfortable conversations so that they're no longer uncomfortable for people in your team.
Yeah, agreed. And, you know, ultimately our presentation deck, consider all the stakeholders there. Make sure you've got a slide that makes you think beforehand as well, because you have to put that slide together. And one tip, you know, thinking about the generic nature or the cookie cut, this is a template proposal deck. Maybe you do have it by category. So you've got FMCG clients or you've got automotive clients. Maybe you're using a case study like the Snickers one for that category, that you could talk to and say, we would like to see this happen to your brand. We don't have all the details yet, but this is what we'd like to see. If you didn't have enough information, but think about the stakeholders that that deck is going to be vetted by, and in particular any procurement or finance people behind the scenes.
And you want to make it so that, that whole notion of we're in this together, often, when you're in a presentation, or before you present an idea that's cracking, my team used to sit there and go, do we do this? Are we going to, in 10 years time, are we going to sit back and go, I did that. And that's not just I did it, we did it. So, present it in a way do yourself a favor so that it gets sold into the business in the way that you intended it to be. So keeping a hold of that creative idea and the IP that you've shared with your clients is really important, so that everybody is proud of doing something amazing and we impacted the KPIs as well.
Absolutely. Good. Well, look, that just leaves us with the Q&A. So there is the Q&A buttons that you can click and put your questions in there, which we can view. I'll just stop sharing for now and just say thanks for Sam attending today as well. She's done quite a few deals in her time, and I found it very interesting to know that there's someone like Sam that we can call on. And it really is in the course of a year, just to put this in perspective, it's not every pitch or every presentation you're going to need Sam in the room to help you. So, pick your mark. It might be once a quarter. You've got something like the big one that comes over your desk where you feel like, I really want to get some outside expertise on this. That would probably be the right time to consider Sam. Likewise with your rates and your pricing, this might be a once a year thing that you do. So it's usually around now, Easter, and then May, June, that I'll be working with agencies to help set you up for the year ahead. So I guess on the back of today's webinar, Sam and I are both offering our services at reduced rates. Sam, did you want to just jump in with your
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so we looked at the data again for how do we make an offer. I don't have a good, better, best. Sorry, Kathryn. But it's entrenched in data. So 81% of you said that less than 50% of my team are competent negotiators. So that really led my team to decide what the best product that we could help you with. We do lots of different things, strategy and one-on-one coaching, but we thought team training on negotiation fundamentals seemed like the best fit. So we have a half-day program that we hope that can transform your team to feel more comfortable, and we're offering a $500 off that for the training. So just get in touch, give us a shout, and we can book something, and I'll tell you a bit more about it at least. So yeah.
Yeah, same. And look, my offers are on the KMint website, and we'll be offering a 10% discount off those, predominantly rate card, and also the Show Me the Money Mentor program to help you through. I do have a question that's come through, and it's pretty much asking you, Sam, how do you deal with the RFQ, request for quotation, I think that is, when the prospect won't allow questions?
Yeah, it's tough. Yeah, we've all been through these different, RFPs, RFQs, RF tenders, whatever. So I think it's about how you map your relationships. So if there's particular people you can't talk to, have a think about who you can talk to and who's actually going to help you, whose opinion's actually going to help you, and have a few off the record conversations. Because don't shy away from asking. Someone can say no to you. No, I can't answer that question, Kathryn. I'm sorry. But if you don't ask, you don't get. So have a think about, okay, is it a big organization or is it a tiny organization? If it's smaller, then it's who they work with around who could give you advice. If it's a bigger organization, possibly it's different people in the organization in different departments. And then that's where in partnership land, we talk about sticky relationships. So making sure that we don't, sorry, the dog is snoring, having relationships across an organization. So your relationship doesn't hinge off one person. So if they leave, that's the end of the relationship. So it's investing time in having relationships across the organization. It's times like this where that really comes into play. So yeah, just keep tapping on the door and say, oh, are you allowed to ask this question? Or actually another one is, if you share the question and the answer with other people who are tendering, would you be happy to answer that question? So you have to choose whether you want to let any secrets out by that process, but just be a bit cheeky and keep asking the questions is really where you might just land something. You just never know. But I know I've actually said a few conversations over coffees that possibly I never had from time to time.
So we've got some other ones here. I've just got one. I'll pick up the last one. So it's a question about freelancers and solo creatives. from Jasmine. So I help freelancers and solo creators price their worth, and the wheel was so valuable, really backs up what I've been saying, that the hourly rates are leaving freelancers hungry. Oh, totally. And it's why the industry's been grappling with this for so long. Everybody attending the webinar feels the same. I know you do, because I work with so many of you and more in this sector. You've got to know your hourly rates, no two ways about it, because we pay our people that way. But you need more than that, and you need to be cleverer than that, because you know the impact you give, you deliver. So I think if you can really understand that side of the table, what are you doing for the client? Because you know what you do, and they know what you can do, because that's why they picked you. And that's, you've got to give a little bit of that, but you don't need too much. It's more about what you're going to do for them, and start talking about the value you're creating for them. So yeah, look, I think you're absolutely right. You don't want to go down that downward spiral. So I'm going to wrap up, because we've just hit our 1 hour mark, and I thank you all for attending. If you do have any questions, of course, just email me. And if they're for Sam, then you're welcome to email Sam as well. I'll just pop up Sam's details so that you can see them. And there it is. Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you. So please just, head over to the websites that we've got there if you've got any questions. And we look forward to hearing how you go with it all. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.